Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Gower, Senior Vice President for Finance, Treasurer, hence the Treasurer's Town Hall. I'm very pleased to see you all. I thought there'd maybe be 5 people here in the middle of July coming to see me. And for those 5, we would have had a very nice interactive visit. So we'll have a nice interactive visit for this group. I'm here to talk about systems strategy. I have been talking about this for a few months now at these town halls around the whole university. So some of you come to those, you may see stuff you have already seen, and you can take a nap. We'll wake you up for the new stuff. And then starting next month or in September, probably move to a different topic, but we'll always come back to what is going on with systems. So for every one of these town halls, we'll always have an update on what's going on with the systems change outs. So why are we doing this? Because the merger, that was enough. The merger was enough to require that we do something about systems, because we are running 2 of everything. 2 general ledgers, 2 HR payroll systems, 2 procurement systems, 2 student information systems. So one could say, okay, you just bring one over to the other, and that really was not the answer, because this was an opportunity, if you will, an excuse to get to a better situation than we have now. So hence the second point, we need more efficient, more effective, more responsive business practices. They need to be set up within the system. That's a foundational element of the strategic plan, and it's a key part of the President's strategic initiatives. It's the opportunity also to provide real savings for those strategic initiatives as we simplify how we do business. The move to responsibility center management budgeting also was a push for doing this, because we need the reporting systems to match the budgeting system. So we need to set up the new accounting in the way that flows directly into that budget model. You know, I like to say, what is today, the 15th? We've been running under RCM for 15 days, and it's going great so far. It won't stay that way. It'll get rocky. And then last but not least, we must be able to provide reliable, accessible, consistent information to university management. We cannot hold academic and administrative leaders accountable if we cannot provide them the information that's necessary for them to do their jobs. So these are the 4 principles, or if you will, purposes of this whole project. Any one of them would have been enough, but having all 4 of them is a real reason for change. We're taking the approach that as we look at a function, as we look at a system, say the accounting system, that the first thing we need to do is look at the business and the organization and do those things first before we start to touch the software. So business process review, organizational design is the first element of any of these projects. Again, because of the merger, we have 2 of everything, including 2 accounting offices, one in ASB 1 in Liberty Plaza. And just because of that, we need to do business process and organizational work. We are also taking most of these administrative functions and moving them to a single building in Piscataway later this year, so that we won't have people in 2 different physical locations. But we really need to align the jobs, align the work, get everything organized in a way that is the best practice going forward. So organizational design is first and foremost. This is going on right now, for instance, in the controller's office, and it's a critical piece. right practices are suggested by the vanilla configurations of the software we're going to be using. We're not going to customize. The president has said specifically he must approve any customizations. Not me. He has to sign off on them. There's a possibility there's some that we will have to do for legal reasons, for New Jersey law. I can foresee some of those perhaps in payroll, but generally speaking, we're not going to do that. So we're going to change the business practices in a way that is effective, is efficient, and goes along with the software. So these are the key pieces as we're looking at those right practices. Pardon me. Eliminate duplicative efforts, improve quality, reduce the number of touches that are made for something, and enhance customer service. So the last one is important, is that each of the offices, certainly each of the offices that report to me, are first and foremost in this work identifying who their customers are and talking in that language. So the language in procurement is becoming more and more around who are the customers need, how is that done. Compliance is important, other elements are important, but what's really important is how do we do the work for the customer needs. In particular, the front lines of the missions, the instruction, research, patient care, public service, those things, they have to get what they need, when they need it, how they need it. Anything that is not dependent on the technology, we're going to do right away. We're getting ready to reorganize the controller's office. That can be done without the system. The system will support it, coming back for it, but we'll have real changes going on in that soon. And this is happening all across the administrative functions. So procurement is doing a similar piece of work. HR and the payroll offices together are going to be doing this starting this fall, where they're getting an intensive review of business practices, customer needs, and how to best satisfy them in the context of the system we want to put in. So this is something that holding everybody to a high set of standards. You've got to do this work before you get to touch the software. You've got to do this work before you get into what is a traditional system implementation. And in fact, if we do this work up front, it'll make that implementation a lot smoother. Because a lot of these things tend to happen in the middle of an implementation if you don't do the work up front. And that's where it gets costly, and that's where it gets confusing, and it gets difficult to communicate about. The bottom line there is another critical principle. We have to put forward change management, communications, and training again and again and again. And the three of them are related. But change management is a skill set that we're going to be teaching everybody. And it is how do we convey and work with you and with you and with you about how your jobs will change as a result of this. And what does it mean? And one of the things I learned by going through this process, this is going to be arguably my 5th time with these kinds of systems, is that you've got to focus on getting people to a state of confusion. I know that sounds perverse, but I was taught by people who really studied this stuff that confusion is the best form of learning. And helping people through that stage. You're always going to have early adopters who are going to know what to do before you do. But most people are in what I call the bell-shaped curve, the top of it, and they're the folks who have to figure it out and are willing to figure it out. And the point is to help them through that. That's what change management is. There's another phrase that is used in these systems about you've got to come out of the valley of despair. You're going along here with the way you always did things. You go down to the valley of despair, And then how fast and how high you get out of it is the real work. And everybody goes through that. It's nothing wrong. In fact, if it doesn't happen, you got something wrong going on. So we got to focus on that. Communications is a critical part of that. We're hiring a communications officer for the project, someone who will work with the university's communications office in the same fashion, but communicate. Cannot over-communicate about these things. So that we intend to make that you all are sick of hearing from us, but you got to hear from us about this. And then finally, training, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit, because that's something that also is a place where projects can fail. This is something I got from one of our vendors. I thought it was a good document to use. What are the things we depend on for the 5 pillars of administrative efficiency and effectiveness of what we can put in? First and foremost, our people and how they're organized. These are next. Customer needs. How are we going to measure our performance? What are the right metrics so that we can tell if we're doing okay? You can't act upon something you can't measure. And technologies are the last piece. That's the enabler at the end. But the other pieces are, again, focal points for what we have to do to be successful here. Oh, thank you. Oh, we're going to run out of juice if I don't talk faster. I'll stand still so you can leave the camera. Okay. All right. So let me talk about the phases of this work. Okay, and it's 5 phases, starting with 0. Where we started, pretty much the day I arrived. And I'll get in these in detail. But it's really something that's going to, as you see, go out through 2018. And it's going to take that long, 1, because there's a lot of systems put in here, but 2, because that BPR work, that business process review, organizational design work, needs to really have time to get done. And I'll tell you, if you look at the order here, it's basically saying this was the stuff to get ready, and that's done, more or less. This is where we're starting right now, today. Phase 1, foundational projects, finance, an HR payroll piece, and student package selection. And this is going to go on through next July. The second phase has to do with HCM, which is a fancy name for HR. As well as some work on student, and I'll get into detail here, payroll and student down here in 2017, and finally student in 2018. And you may gather something here that student is going through all 4 years. And that's because of all the business practices, all the system requirements, all the information needs. That turned out to be the most complex of any of them. Any of them. By the way, this will be available on the web this afternoon at finance.rutgers.edu. So that's the one where across the different organizational units of the university, New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, RBHS, we have varying needs. And the practice has been, even within a single university area like Newark or like New Brunswick, there have been varying practices in regards to student services, in regards to student information practices. All that's got to be reviewed. That's going to take, that review process, that kind of how are we going to organize ourselves, will probably take 2 years before we even start working on software. And this is a little bit risky because the student information system that is in legacy Rutgers is a homegrown system. It's got some real risk points to it in terms of maintenance, but the real work needed to come on the business process, organizational. We've got to decide what has got to be local for New Brunswick versus system, versus across all 4 units, as an example. Certain things have to be done across the system, like student accounting, like financial aid compliance. There are certain areas that just because of how we act as a single corporation, how we act as a single, the big R, I call it, big university, we have to do centrally. But there are a lot of things that need to be done more locally. And this is where the reorganization of the university into these 4 organizational pieces actually puts the pressure on what do we define of needing to be done for New Brunswick. There are certain functions that have existed in Newark and RBHS and Camden, but New Brunswick is kind of tied in with Central in the past, and that's where a lot of the organizational design work has to take place. So that's why that looks like it's going to take a long time to do student. So let's get into some details. I can move now. So this is what we did coming up to, like the end of June. A fit gap project. That was where we decided which system we were going to use going forward, what were the requirements. Were we going to take the one that came from UMD&J or the one that was here, or a third, which is actually where we kind of are. We're using an advanced system of what has been in place in Rutgers before. We had to do a project to actually consolidate the information from the 2 general ledgers into a single way of talking, and that is leading to a new chart of accounts. One of the things that you will find, whether you are from Legacy Rutgers or Legacy UMD&J, is that the financial language will change to a single language, but it'll be different for both. We're basically throughout the 2 charts of accounts and have started with something fresh, focused on reporting capabilities, focused on output, focused on the RCM budget model. So the things that are built into the new chart of accounts are really around those needs, and that's work that has been going on for over a year now. And this is work that typically would be done in the next year. We've got to jump on it, and we had to do that. There's a pre-award system, RAPS. You've seen some emails, one the other day from Chris Malloy, that as it is rolling out, that's part of this. Research administration is part of this overall project too. Integrated reporting strategy, this is still ongoing, so that at the end of phase 1, when we go live, financial system a year from now, reports will be ready. And there'll be ones that have been identified through work with units, work with schools and departments as those that are needed, and will be available. But this is a critical piece, including what tools are we going to use. There's some people in the university who use Tableau, some people use Oracle tools, some use other types. We're going to settle on a couple of different tools and be able to train people to them. We established a project management office. Over here to my left is John Fakasny. He is the project executive and been here 3 months? Almost 4 months. But John and I worked together at our last gig, and he's got extensive experience in this, including at Yeshiva University where we were before, but before that at CBS. So he really knows his way around this stuff. And what's underlying the project management office, here you see change management, communication specialist, training specialist, so that we have people dedicated to providing an umbrella of change management, of training, of communications across all these projects at one time. And then last but not least, space management system has been going in out of Tony Calcado's office. It is almost ready to roll out in its first iteration. It has been a critical element too, very quiet project, but a critical element because it's combining information. The combined new university had 10 different space management systems, and this is getting down to one that it can be interactive with units, that they can actually see drawings that are accurate and can establish who is in what space. That's very important for the RCM budget model because now we're assigning cost for space. But it's also vital for the facilities and administrative cost report that we have to file with the federal government by December 31st. So this is the year that we renew the indirect cost rate, if you will. So the space information has to be right. And that'll be rolling out late summer for review by every unit of how the space is used, and then finally we'll take a snapshot for the feds. A lot of work here, mainly done, but this is where we're starting right now. So there's 7 elements of this, some bigger than others. The first one is financial management. This is the general ledger. This is replacing the financial parts of RIAS, as now called. We will have a new name. General ledger, project accounting, and grants. So the grant management had never been turned on in RIAS, and we've been using the homegrown systems ever since whenever. That's another at-risk system. So because of support, the language that it was built in, and so on. We will be bringing the grants management system online, concurrent with the new general ledger. And the target's July 1 of 16, so roughly a year from now. And now's the point we're getting nervous because it's now less than a year that we have to get all this work done. We're also going to be setting up, maybe not on the first day, but very soon thereafter, a central accounts receivable capability. It's amazing we don't have that across the university, but capability that when a unit bills for whatever reason, for a grant, for a service, for whatever, that there's no way to facilitate it or capture it, and that'll be part of this, as well as cash management and treasury functions that are desperately needed. These are things that had been in the work plan for the last round of systems for Rutgers, but between time, money, and energy never got turned on. So these are critical, and I think the project management, grants management piece was clearly identified as we were going around in business requirements as probably the #1 thing needed for the university. So high emphasis on that. Most of you who do budgets are familiar with Hyperion applications, Hyperion planning, because you use them now. Well, just remember the broadest sense of that, because we're going to be redoing that whole budget preparation package, aligning it with RCM so that it will be set up in such a way to interact appropriately with the budget model, with the reporting model. This will be available for administrative units who are in the cost side of RCM this fall, and it'll be available to the schools and centers to use for the fiscal 17 budget around about January, February. This will also provide a lot of capability where you can do what-if analyses. You can do different models. You can try 3 different budgets until and pick the last one. And then there will be consolidation and review processes all the way up. That'll be automated. This is a critical piece because this is where the reporting also is going to come. Some of you may have been involved in a project over the last few months with Ernst & Young, who came around to look for reporting requirements and find the big themes, if you will. And we just had a meeting yesterday that identified the 31 most important reports. Now, there are more than that, but 31 to start And if we can accomplish those in the next year, some of which we can do in this year that we're in fiscal 16. We don't have to wait for the new system. We can do them earlier than that. But if we can accomplish those, then we will have a good foundation of reporting available, financial reporting available for all of you to start with the new system. So that is a major part of this effort, identifying those things and now working them into the system plan is critical. Then continue to identify needs, then continue to identify refinement of those things such that we end up with the right kinds of tools and we can eliminate shadow systems that now exist. And they exist because there's a reason for them to exist, because they weren't being supported, something wasn't being supplied. We just need to eliminate that need by providing the service. So that's a key piece here. We have so many different businesses, types of business that we do, that it's important to spend time on this piece. And that'll come out of that effort there. We'll be working on capital planning and integrating that into this. This is not for most people to deal with, but some of you may be dealing with capital plans. And we'll be doing that at a university at New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, RBHS level, and working through that. Here's an area, procurement applications. Anybody from RBHS here? Okay, so you all are familiar with SciQuest for buying stuff. We're going to extend that system to the whole university and then re-implement it so that it is friendlier, more integrated with everything. So that's going to be the Amazon-like buying setup for anything, including internal stuff, that we can run through that. And it'll be integrated with invoicing and all that such, so that at any time you can see exactly where an order is and see exactly where the invoice is and whether it's been paid or not. So that's critical. It'll be, it won't be a heavy lift for those who are at RBHS, but you will see improvements out of it. The other area, which usually gets applause, is replacing the TABOR process with an automated system, expense management system. It is unconscionable, the system that we have now. I every time I look at one of those, I just think, how can we possibly run the university that way? We can't. And how can we possibly ask people who are traveling or have to buy things for the university to use personal credit cards? That is also unacceptable. So combined with an expense management online system, and the fact is, people have done this for years now. This is not anything new. We can put in a great system that meets all the compliance requirements and all the control requirements, but works, right off the bat, and combine that with a travel card program, so that those who need to travel will use a card that's tied in with the expense management system, but doesn't draw on your credit. To ask you to use your credit card for registering for a conference and 6 months later you get paid is just unacceptable. So, as I said, this is where we usually get applause. But now the other piece of this that is not inconsequential is that the TABOR process doesn't allow us to gather any data. There are no data on how much we use United Airlines out of Newark, or how much we use US Air out of Philadelphia. No data. So we can't negotiate with them. We can't contract with hotels. We can't contract with anybody with data. So something that's going on in procurement right now is physically going through a year's worth of TABORs and amassing the information, the travel information, because we want to develop, tied in with this, a travel management program, a vendor that will help us, like an online travel agent, but one that works for us, But we need those data so they can help us with the negotiations of contracts. So that's the other piece here. Capturing the data is as important as anything else here, because otherwise we can't get the best price for the university. So it's a win-win-win in that respect. And this is an area where, again, we're not doing anything new. It's done all the time. I was with a vendor recently and having lunch, and I paid for my own, he paid for his. But when he paid for his, he took the receipt and he took his smartphone and he took a picture of the receipt. And that fed directly into their expense management system. And then he threw away the receipt. There's no need to tape those to any 11 by 8 piece of paper. And there's also no need, one of the big things that was a problem with P-card programs, procurement card programs, we started one at Duke back in the 90s, and the biggest issue was where do you keep the receipts for compliance purposes? Well, if you take pictures of them and you put them in the central system, you don't keep them anywhere. That's sufficient. So this eliminates the file cabinet issue in your office and in my office, my accounts payable office. So big deal there. HR payroll, so this is only going to be a big deal for people who are in RBHS, because what we're going to do is move everybody who's an RBHS employee on Banner HR payroll, move them over to the current Rutgers HR payroll system. We're not really going to fix anything along the way, because the most important thing is to get those employees over in that system and paid correctly. Okay? We need everybody on one system to then advance, to then improve, but to try to move them from two is just impossible. Plus, we can't implement the kind of concurring work days and work weeks and calendars and other elements that are different between the two parts of the university now. We can't do those while they're still using two systems. So that's the other big project here, is moving the employees over, having the business processes in place, which will require retraining of everybody who was involved in HR, Banner HR payroll. That's not a little task, I recognize that. To using the current practices for Rutgers, the old Rutgers system, the old PeopleSoft system, and then, but to pay the people correctly. So this is where it will require months of testing, down to paycheck, pennies, dollars, pennies level. Not unusual for this type of project, not unusual for any type of HR payroll project, but it's going to have to be done, and it has to be done right. We're hoping to do that by July 1 of 2016 as well. This is one, though, that we will take the time to get it right. And make sure that it comes in correctly and that the training is done. Research administration, there will be ongoing work on RAPS as it rolls out. There are going to be things that are packaged around it. There's been a lot of work on research administration on the from partnering with Huron Consulting Group. You may have seen a lot of emails from me and from Chris Malloy about that project since last fall. There is a website, era.rutgers.edu, and the ERA is the name of the project, Excellence in Research Administration. And if you want to see the guts of all the things that are going on there, which are a lot, go to that website. And part of that is the both aligning and automating of processes for research, things like conflict of interest information, IRB information, IACUC information, account setup. Another thing that we are awful at, absolutely awful against any other university in the country, is how long it takes us to set up an award and an account for that. And it was worse in UMD than it was in Rutgers, but it was terrible in Rutgers, so it was really bad. Now, and anywhere from 35 to 50 days to 60 days. There's one that I know is an outlier, but it says it's 811 days. I don't know what that one is. It has to be just something weird, but the standard time is just unacceptable. And so this is an area that we've targeted right now to deal with before we even have new systems. So it's business process change, but it's also organizational change, where we're changing how the pre-award and the post-award offices are set up to facilitate doing that correctly. Best practice, by the way, is 5 days. If we get to 15, they'll be cheering in the streets, So we're pushing for best practice there, but we're also pushing just to get it acceptable. So that's an area where it would be a lot of work. Student information system, here the real work is that business process organizational stuff. And we're putting out an RFP in the next couple of weeks on the street for consultants to help us with that process, people who know the student information and student compliance and business process business there. And then somewhere along the way, we'll select the package. We kind of put that behind because it isn't a critical path, and also because the vendors out there are continuing to improve those packages, so almost the longer we take to do it, the better choices we will have. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in IT that will help this whole thing. Virtualization of servers, upgrade of data centers, but one that will be impacting everybody is the consolidation of email. There's an argument whether there's 150 or 200 email systems at Rutgers. And face it, there should be one. It's insane that it's like that, and that will get in the way of a lot of the other system work, but it also costs us a lot of money to do that when there are companies that do this for virtually nothing. You know who runs our student email? Google. It was outsourced a long time ago. So we have had a competitive process, and frankly it was between Google and Microsoft, and are coming down to the end of that decision point. And the key here is not so much how it's used, because the front ends, the screen you'll see is not going to be that different. But we will get everybody to the standard first dot last at rutgers.edu kinds of email addresses. But we need to take all the emails and all those 200 systems and convert them over, the archive stuff. So that's a big process. That'll be going on over the course of the next year. And as I mentioned before, we're going to continue to work on these reports and integrated management reporting. As I said, we've identified 31 critical reports. 9 of them should be able to be done right away in the current year and the current systems. There's another 17 that could be done by next July, and then in the new systems, all 31. So that's a big goal. Just to go forward, and I'm not going forward now because that little thing got down there. So what comes next? About this time next year, we'll be talking about phase 2. Phase 2 is putting in place the HR fixes and a new HR system. And you may have noticed I didn't say HR payroll, because we're actually going to separate those and do HR first, get it right, continue to run the existing payroll system, because we can't afford to screw that one up, and then focus our energies subsequently on the payroll and the things associated with that. But it will get set up from a single set of business processes and org changes and retraining of that. It'll focus on the basic HR functions and benefit functions. There are some things that'll be going on in terms of dealing with New Jersey specific types of requirements for taxes and other things like that. Whoops. Notice here, migrate the entire employee population to this cloud system. That's why we need to do the first phase in getting everybody on the existing payroll system. They're not migrating at one time. And we'll be keeping the existing PeopleSoft, whoops, sorry, for this year, not trying to mess that up. And then reporting for HR payroll. So there'll be the detailed review like we did for financial information on what exactly we need, what exactly you need for HR payroll data. Student information, boy, I'm really hitting the wrong thing here. Student information, continuing on that, we'll start to implement stuff, have a partner in place, and then further IT infrastructure. Phase 3, here's where we focus on payroll, including time and labor absence management. We'll migrate everything over from the existing payroll system and test. Student information system, we'll start to see first round modules coming in play. Student information is also complicated in that you've got to do it in a sequence. So if you don't do, you've got to do applications before you do enrollment, before you do registration, before you do billing, or financial aids in there too. So, and if you miss that sequence, if you miss part of it, you can't start in the middle. You have to wait till the next cycle. So that's why it's also complicated from getting this part of the system brought up, because we have to hit those cycles correctly. We can't be down on applications, so we have to either be ready for them or we have to wait another year. And if we wait on applications, then we're not going to do enrollments and we're not going to do some of the other things. So there you go. Phase 4 is the end. It says 2018. I hope we hit that. It might extend a little longer. But this is when we'll get all those pieces up and running and presumably then be running on improvements, running on continuous improvement at that point. These are common efforts that we have across all these projects. I call it the umbrella, the things that will be consistent. Project management, we have professional project managers in units that report up through John. They will have a single way of doing things, single system for project management, reporting, communications, problem resolution, and so on. Change management, we're recruiting a change management expert. This is someone who may be, if you've heard of Six Sigma or Lean kinds of things, where there are processes, there are ways of doing this out in the rest of the world that we're going to bring in-house, and those people will be working with the rest of the project group as well as with the vendors in terms of having consistency in change management. Communications, consistent and constant. Training. Training is one of the areas where really people trip over themselves. Training has to be constant. And it also has to be pretty much just in time. It doesn't do any good. I mean, studies have shown that if you're trained as late as 2 weeks before go live, that it's probably too early for you to retain it. Because if you can't then start to do it, you lose it very quickly. So we need a lot of different mechanisms too. Multimodal, so in-person, webinar, on demand, what I call the basic cheat sheets that are needed, whether they be online or on real pieces of paper. Ad hoc assistance, one of the best things that we found at our last project was called problem luncheons, where we just get a room with machines in there, we get the subject matter experts there, you have a problem, you bring it there and work it through. That's found to be very effective, and it's also found to be not as, you might think of that as inefficient, but it isn't. It really works its way through because, again, if you learned how to do it, then you will help the other person in your unit how to do it. The help desk has to be multi-tiered. It has to have the quote-unquote easy things available readily, and then have a good problem resolution to the second tier, what it's called. People who got to get into something that's not unusual. And if I've solved a problem for you today, it needs to be recorded in a system such that that could be accessed tomorrow by somebody else with the same problem, not do it again. This has been done in the rest of the world for years and years and years now. We're not inventing anything. We're just adopting it. Ongoing refresher and new skills courses. That's an important piece, along with something that is forgotten often on projects, and that is the person who starts working here the day after the system went live. So it's not just about changing people who are here, it's about the new people coming in, getting the skills, getting the training. And we're going to be doing certifications. You're not going to get into the system until you've gone through a training and been through some kind of testing or certification process. Just won't get privileges. So that's dependent on us to have the right kinds of training in place at the right time and the right assessment there. And for folks who are going to be using these systems along the way to get to those training sessions, make time for those. Also common to the whole thing is reporting. As I mentioned before, we're going to have a standard set of tools, not just one set, but probably 2 or 3 that will be supported. Multiple levels. We need reporting capabilities for what I call the real data geeks, down to the people who just need to push the button or have it on their screen as a dashboard, and everything in between there. There's 4 or 5 different levels of reporting that we've identified, and we have to address those, each one of those. And reporting itself needs a help desk. So I need to find out how to report on this. How do I do it? So targets of where we expect to be: financial management, the BPR organizational assessment implementation. This is reorganizing the controller's office and the budget office. Will happen in this fall. The GL, accounts payable, project and grants implementation, and pieces of accounts receivable that are associated with grants will be live July 1 of 16. So for that next fiscal year. And this includes that new chart of accounts that I mentioned. So there'll be a whole new set of strings of numbers. I'll bring that at another talk, on these, where we get into what are all those pieces. But we're really dividing the string into things that we need for reporting. As an example, one of the big things that came out of the initial talk around the university was we needed to be able to identify something was happening physically. And this was a need for clinics, it was a need for extension activities, it was a need for a lot of things. It kept coming up again and again and again. And so we have it's not just is it in New Brunswick or is it in Newark. It's around a location. And so there's a new field on the chart of accounts for location, for that, when it's needed. When it's not needed, you can put 3 zeros in or something like that. But where it's needed, we have a place to put it. Good example of that. We also have a field for what I call pan-university activities. So Cancer Institute is represented here. Where'd he go? There you go. And I use this as an example from a past life when I was at Duke in the medical school there. one of the things that was most challenging as a cancer institute for the core grant that we'll go through is you have to accumulate information on all the cancer activities across the university, not just those that are in the Cancer Institute. So if we have a tag in the general ledger system that says I'm in SEBS, look at you, I'm in SEBS, but I have a cancer grant, cancer-oriented grant, you can mark it that way. So that was the first example. There have been dozens that have come out of that since then, even down to things like capturing all the costs associated with commencement. That's another activity like that came out of this. But the cancer, the core grant kind of data was one that we had to solve at Duke back in the 90s, that same problem. Okay, budget planning and forecasting, I mentioned before, central units like mine will start using this for budgeting in the fall. Well, why are we doing that in the fall? If you're in a school and you're going to be getting cost allocations to you under RCM, you can't do that unless the cost units have done their budgeting. So cost units from the president's office down to what happens at the individual universities and the chancellor's offices and local student affairs and all that, they'll be doing their budgets this fall so that they can feed into the model starting in January, and that schools and centers that are responsibility centers will have their cost allocation information in February, and will have then time to do their own budgets. That's the second phase, the unit planning, RC unit planning, and starting in February. This is important for a few of us, but it's important for RCM in general because anybody who was involved in RCM knew that this year it was dependent on very complex spreadsheets, and we need to automate that. So we're implementing a cost allocation system that will take the core information and do the calculations and then be transparent, be able to be looked into, drilled into, so that you can see where costs came from. So that's an important piece to keep that going. The marketplace tools and expense management, including the travel card, again by July 1 of 16. The HR payroll, the banner migration, hoping that by July 1 of 16 that we can accomplish that. I've started to temper that a little bit at the request of my project management staff because it's aggressive to have all these things going on at one time. And we have to make sure, as I say, have enough time there to test the change, test the paychecks. So that's the goal. But if it has to go a little longer, we'll figure out how to do that. We expect by winter of 2016, early winter, or this coming winter, to have the BPR assessment for HR and payroll largely done and ready to start working on the new HR system. And again, anything that comes out of those studies that we can implement before the new system, we will implement. And then the first round of BPR for student, hopefully by January, system selection then, and then in research continuing on what are called the waves of implementation of improved business processes and organizational changes in research administration, along with the RAPS implementation. So this is where we are up to today. And I'll stop talking and take questions. And for the sake of the recording and the streaming, if you have a question, I'll get the mic, give you a mic. Okay, now it can't be that clear. You gotta have a question. It's either that or you're frozen in this room. Thank you. A brave soul.
I have a question regarding the student information system.
Yeah.
A few of us participated on a fit gap a few years ago.
Yes.
I was wondering if that data will be reused, or is that data too outdated?
Nope,
to make a
that
choice?
data was reused. What we did was to add the comparable data for our VHS to those data and put them together. So all that work was for good use and is the foundation of the business requirements.
Great, thank you.
Yep. It was revisited. Some of it went back out, if you will, to just have a gut check to make sure that, everything that was in there was still relevant. Other questions?
Mike, what you just outlined is an incredibly ambitious set of projects for the university. I think everyone in the room, I'm sure, agrees that they're all needed. When the university did the RIAS HCM project, there was planning at a central level to add staff to HR to make that happen, but there was no working with units to help us understand how it was going to affect our workforce. It changed people's jobs. Most of us had to add employees to make it happen. That was all invisible. How are we going to address that issue with all of these projects?
That's a good question. So the whole element of change management that I referred to here and having that, bringing in a professional to help us work with units, to work with the project teams and how they work with units to identify that delta, to identify what those changes will be is critical piece here. That and the communications and the training. Those three things, that's the triangle of making this thing work. So, I am hopeful that a lot of what we're going to see with the new technology that is available to us will actually make things easier to do. There's a lot of things I think the RBHS folks in here will probably be able to tell you that ordering off of SciQuest versus ordering out of Oracle is easier to do because the contracts are there and everything is right there. The catalogs are right there. So that's what I'm hoping that we see through these pieces. Some of it will be, frankly, back office. How does Steve DiPaolo's shop do all that? The biggest change, I think, for most people is going to be you're going to get a different code for everything, for every grant, for every unit. And studies show that that is a disruption that lasts about a month until people have it, pasted on the wall or memorized the new code, and then you're done.
But okay, yeah, it's the technology, but it's the business process change that affects the unit,
right.
But it's not just going to affect Steve's shop.
No, it isn't. And in fact, that is the point of those business process reviews, is to identify those interactions and prepare for those to communicate with units on how those changes could impact them. And also to change, to do course corrections if needed too. So you're absolutely right. It is not about just Steve's shop. Some of it is. But it's how it then interfaces with you that is a critical element of those studies. Same with HR payroll. That's why we're looking at, basically 6 to 12 months of BPR work in HR payroll to understand those interactions. That's what's gone on with these reporting requirements. Intensive discussions that are not going to be perfect, but they're going to be pretty good out of the block. It is ambitious. If we do the business process work, if we do the change management, if we do the training planning, if we do all those things, we can hit it. But it is ambitious. If we hadn't done a year's worth of chart of accounts studying now, we'd be doing a year's worth of accounts chart of accounts studying before we start working on the new GL. But fortunately, that's under the belt. If we were going to change the HR payroll system out of the box, we'd be behind. But no, we're bringing our colleagues over into it. So, yep.
So with regards to the student systems, I know as part of the fit gap analysis that was done a few years ago, basically it was found that every school or unit that had students and courses and grades had completely different sets of requirements.
Yep.
And a lot of those, almost all of those rules and policies are governed by faculty governance. So it's not that there's a rule that's made by the school and the school can just decide to change it. How is that change management going to happen on the school level, because many of those things that are going to need to change to not be, or to become vanilla, they're going to be based on faculty vote?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't discount that, and that's why we have so much time built in here, because that's not something I can do. That's something that the chancellors and the deans and the chairs are going to have to do with the faculty. Now, we don't have a choice. The number of different variations that we have across the 30 schools of this university. First of all, to have 30 schools in a university is an incredible number. And with any luck, we'll soon have 29 because the law schools are merging. But, and they just did that work, by the way, of aligning their curricula, aligning their admissions requirements, aligning all those elements. So there's the School of Nursing is doing that work. But I'm not discounting that as being a big deal. And that was identified by the study a couple years ago as the biggest deal. We have stuff here, though, differences that I've never seen at other institutions. So the disparity between undergraduate instruction is amazing here, and most of the time it is not discipline related. So I mean, there might be something discipline related for the School of Nursing or the School of Pharmacy at an undergraduate level, but most of it isn't. Most of it is just because.
Right.
So this is not a small piece of work, and it's going to require the chancellors, the deans, the chairs do a lot of work. And if we don't, we can't do the system, because there's no way we can build a new system around the way we do business now. But it's also not right for the students. This is the key element of the strategic plan, is the student experience. The student experience as it relates to student affairs or student related activities like this is really terrible. And that's on us.
Okay, so the plan is basically to have the deans and the chancellors work with the schools and strongly encourage or tell them
Yes.
that these have to change.
Yes.
Okay.
No, we have to get to a point where it is, there will be negotiations.
Okay.
If it ran in the U.S. Other questions? You're letting me off easy. Come on. But I know you probably want to go warm up. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Again, we do this once a month and rotate across the university, and then within New Brunswick, Piscataway, we rotate across the different campuses here. We'll continue to provide updates regularly here. We're getting ready to hire a communications officer for the project, and you're going to start seeing more stuff about this regularly coming into an email box near you. So hang in there, and we'll need all your help to make this successful. Again, this goes back to the strategic plan. I cannot emphasize enough that it's not just because of the merger, although that would be enough. it's because of the strategic goals for the university, whether it be the student experience, whether it be efficient, effective processes, whether it be the ability to get more grants, whether it be the ability to understand what it costs to instruct our students, whether it make it better, easier to bring people on board. Onboarding is a big part of the BPR work there. That's all part of, aligning with the strategic goals of the university. So this is high on the mind of the president and the chancellors. The chancellors are intricately involved with this. It is the board level, board discussion about this on a very regular basis. So it's critical for us to succeed to accomplish this stuff. It's not just a nice to have at this point. Thank you very much. Hope you all have a great summer.